Hello, this is Andrei Sannikov and Belarus File. Today I'll be talking to a remarkable man, Diego Arria, Venezuelan diplomat, former governor of Caracas. The man is known for giving his name to the famous formula, which is used now in the Security Council of the United Nations and is used in particular for the situation in Belarus. It's been discussed there twice using this formula of which bears his name, Arria Formula. He is also known to testify during the trial of Yugoslavian dictator Slobodan Milosevic because he invented his formula at the time of massacre and genocide in Srebrenica, and to open up the discussions of this horrendous case of mass killings of the people. He also is known for filing charges against Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez in the International Court of International Criminal Court. He is still active. He is very active in campaigning for human rights and democracy, in particular in his own country, his native country, Venezuela. He is now leading a campaign to deprive Venezuelan authorities of dictatorial authorities of the seat in the United Nations Human Rights Council. So he is the man whose vast experience and wisdom is very useful today in these difficult times when we are fighting for human rights and for basic freedoms. Great. So how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great.
You're a legend, and it's not a compliment. It's a fact because diplomats are, as I understand, technologists, and they usually stay behind the scenes. But you gave the name to the very important procedure in the Security Council of the United Nations, which is bearing your name, Arria Formula, which is being used now for Belarus. I don't know whether you know it or not, but there were already two meetings on using your formula on situation in Belarus. And I heard you are now leading the campaign on to deprive Venezuela of the seat in the Human Rights Council, yes. And you also mentioned that Estonia was quite helpful in these efforts, as well as Ukraine. So I can also tell you that Estonia was the initiator. They initiated the first Arria Formula meeting on Belarus in December. And they are very instrumental, and really they are very committed to human rights. But I want to start with the congratulations. Because I think this congratulations is connected with what we're going to talk about. I want to congratulate you with a recognition of the Sarajevo City Council as the honorary citizen of Sarajevo. And I think this is connected exactly with the time when you invented your formula and when you were president of the Security Council, and when you first used this formula to help the people, and actually you did help the people with what you did in the Security Council. Can you tell me a few words about this time and how come you came to this idea of informal meetings?
The probably the best explanation why this modality that honors me with my name is the only one that the United Nations has today, is how close the Security Council was. That when I created a possibility that non-members of the Council or members of this civil organization could participate, it was the first, I would say, democratic opening of the Security Council. I was the president of the Security Council, and the war was starting already in former Yugoslavia. And a priest from Medjugorje in Bosnia and Herzegovina, near the border with Croatia, came to see me and he told me that they were, killing people all over the place and throwing them in trucks, and nobody would listen to him at the United Nations. So when I heard this priest called Father Brocco, if I remember well, I invited the members of the Security Council to have coffee with me at the delegates lounge, which is like a coffee shop.
And you were president at that time, yeah?
I was president of the Security Council. But I invited them on a personal basis, not in the Security Council room, but at the delegates lounge to have a coffee with me. And I invited the priest, and the priest spoke, and I noticed the effect that this information that the General Secretariat was not providing to us, not the big countries in the council. So we didn't know what's going on. And then this priest was like a ray of light, bringing information that we were scandalized. So I noticed that next day when the Security Council met, I remember looking at the Japanese ambassador in front of me. When he addressed the issue, I realized that he was addressing the issue in a more humane way because he knew more than before. Then since then we had Arafat, we had Mandela, and today there have been more than 300 meetings on the Arria Formula. By the way, next week on the 12th, Ukraine and Estonia are organizing another Arria Formula to talk about the Crimea situation, which, as you know, is a very delicate issue. And Estonia and Ukraine have been great supporters. And actually, in the case of my own country, that is today suffering under a tyranny.
Yeah, but you know that today this format has changed, and the change is because it became public. When you were inventing it, when you launched it, it was informal meetings, and in my view, it was maybe more useful. Because today they're video recorded, they are streamed, and people are using it more for for information purposes, for propaganda purposes maybe. But what is your view? How to act in this situation? For example, as for our country, for Belarus, how to achieve results? Because sometimes the results like silence and confidentiality.
Well, I think you have a good point. I don't have a very definite position on that, but when the meetings are in what they call the informal consultations or on the Arria Formula, and they are private, the main members, the permanent members, that usually are the ones that do not want to change, nothing will change their views, not even if you bring the Holy Ghost to the meeting.
Yeah.
So, for example, I remember 3 years ago, I think, Ukraine was in the Security Council a member, and they tried to bring the issue of the cyber warfare that Russia was threatening them with, and the Russia veto that the Ukraine was a member of the Security Council would present that case in the Security Council. And then the Ukrainian ambassador at the time, who is now ambassador in Washington, called for an Arria meeting, open. And I tell you something, it was much more important because then all the media came. So it had that advantage that instead of being private, it became public. And actually for Ukraine, it was more important that to make it public for the world than to have it private for the Security Council. So
I see.
Those are the two visions.
I see. Very good point. Tell me another thing. For example, I know that usual position of those states who veto decisions not to take part even in the Arria Formula meetings. But this time, Russia, which was clearly against the discussion of Belarus, and even Belarus, they did participate. Does it mean, in my view, it's a very good sign of recognition that the problem exists by both antagonists that are, in this case, Russia and Belarus. What's your view? China also participated. It usually vetoes this kind of meetings.
You know, as you know, the Arria Formula cannot be vetoed. you can abstain from participating.
Yeah, yeah.
But you cannot veto.
Of course.
And that's a formidable instrument, because if they do not participate, it was worse because they could not even make an objection. Now, even though they don't agree many times, they participate. And in a way, the Arria Formula is a way no one can say now, I was not informed, I didn't know about that issue. If Belarusians have told us, the opposition would have told us that, we would have acted differently. No excuses. The Arria Formula puts an end to excuses that are according to the interests of certain parties. It's the end of excuses.
So you think that it is better to have this open, and it is better to have the parties participating?
You know why? Because usually the Arria Formula comes when there are no possibility to actually handle that internally in the Security Council. For example, the High Commission of Human Rights, Prince Said, the previous one, when he was to present his report on human rights for the world, especially China, it was vetoed at the Security Council meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
So immediately, the French, the British, and the Americans called for an Arria Formula meeting at 3 o'clock the same day. And then it was a big meeting, public. And so I think for the world was much better to have a wide open up the Security Council rather than staying in a small room.
I see. I have another question which is connected, may be connected with also the Security Council meetings. Your case against Chavez in the International Criminal Court. What was the basis for this case, and in what capacity did you submit it? And can you tell me a few words on the procedure, on the formal
Yes.
procedures? And because I of course I admire what you did, and everybody admires what you did, and we would like to use your experience in this area as well.
Thank you. Well, I threatened Chavez publicly on television. I said, I will go to the International Criminal Court on November 22nd, I believe it was, of 2011, and I'm going to bring a formal accusation against you for the crimes against humanity that you have committed in my country. I had been working with a group of jurists for about almost a year to prepare a well-founded case of why Chavez could be accused of violating the Rome Statute. And it was clear that he had chosen specific groups in our society to go after them. Actually, I ended up being one of them, because after that, Chavez confiscated my property in Venezuela. That was my contribution to the case. Chavez died even before the preliminary investigations were developed. Now we have another case. We have it against Maduro. As you know, they are against individuals. In this case, because he's still alive, we have been able to advance more. And we are now what they call preliminary investigation.
You also said that, yes, everybody criticizes United Nations, but when the problem arises, really, everybody comes to the United Nations for the solution. So it's a kind of controversy in what you are, because of course with your experience you know very well the United Nations, and you know that it is not effective, especially in the area of human rights. And if you look at the composition of the Human Rights Council today, it's horrible. It's simply horrible. But you, one of the creators of the inventive mechanism, like your formula in the, what do you think could be done more to use here, really to have United Nations be on our side, on the side of freedom fighters, on the side of human rights defenders? I know that you are leading several campaigns, and I admire what you are doing, really.
Thank you. The issue at the end is that we are criticizing a non-existent United Nations. Actually we should say this is the fault of Russia, the United States, United Kingdom, France, and China, because they dominate the
Yeah.
Security Council. For example, today 1 million Uyghurs in China are in detention camps. China has more votes than anybody else in the United Nations. And you cannot tell me that China is a democratic and free society.
Yeah.
But they are members of the Human Rights Council. So actually, it is unfair to talk of the United Nations when actually we should be criticizing, in certain cases, the United States or Russia or France or China or the United Kingdom, and not the United Nations. But the United Nations is like an umbrella. So they all take cover at the United Nations of the things they want to do or that they do not want to do. So they use the United Nations when they want to cover up many things. And when they don't want to cover up, they act individually. Like the case when the France and the United Kingdom, the United States decide to get rid of Gaddafi, but not the United Nations. I don't know whether I'm making myself clear, but the point is, I think it's unfair when we say, oh, the United Nations. It's not the United Nations. It is some of the countries of the United Nations that dominate the United Nations.
Yeah, absolutely. You make it very clear that a very good point that it is they're covering behind the United Nations, and we are playing these games of criticizing the United Nations instead of criticizing the perpetrator. Another question connected with the first two questions, because we're thinking also, not thinking, we're gathering material to address the international criminal court on issues of crimes against humanity of Lukashenko and his regime. But the problem is that Belarus didn't sign and didn't ratify the Rome Statute. But there are still referral mechanisms, and one of them is Security Council. Of course, it is not possible even to think that all the 5 members would agree to refer the case of Belarus to the International Criminal Court. But in your view, is it worth still try to table the resolution, draft resolution? It will be vetoed, it will be contradicted. Your formula will be used maybe to discuss it, to publicize it. In my view, it's worth trying, because it will be still in future, it will be a basis for any kind of decision that might come.
This is the case of Belarus?
Yeah.
Yes, I agree 100%. You have to live on the record. That's what's going on. And you have to make them pay the consequences of what their actions or non-actions mean for the situation in Belarus and for freedom in the world. So if you do not propose a solution, you let them pass. You let them take cover with silence. No, I think it's important to have the Arria Formula and to have meetings and to actually try to get the resolution and force them to veto it.
Great. Thank you. My last question will be on I think we have a lot in common, unfortunately, in the situation in Venezuela and Belarus.
Yes.
And there is always, it's arguments of the people who don't want actually to take measures to bring these perpetrators to justice against sanctions. What do you think of international sanctions against dictators, against dictatorial regimes? Because I think my view is that the only way to punish them, the only way, it is not a strategy, but without this instrument you cannot achieve anything. If you just condone what they are doing, it will be not helpful for the situation.
I wish we could do it. In the case of Belarus, where Lukashenko has been an accomplice to the Venezuelan regime, for example.
Absolutely. We spoke with my friend David Smolansky about this, and he told me about what.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, David Smolansky is a good friend of mine too.
Yeah, it's a great man.
And in the case of Belarus, it is clear.
But your personal view, is it an effective instrument if the sanctions are being introduced against dictators?
Yes, I think it's very important. The problem is who is going to impose those sanctions. You know, resolutions are cheap, they are inexpensive, and they do not have high cost for the one who imposes them because they are very seldom used effectively. One of your cases was Milosevic, that
Yeah.
after 100 resolutions, we got him out when the Americans decided to bomb him. But that was not a resolution, it was a bombardment, which is absolutely different.
You know what I was thinking about you? I think that, yes, your country, as my country, is in a difficult situation. But I think that you are a very unique case, you personally, because you saw the end of three dictators with whom you dealt. Chavez, Milosevic, and Pinochet. I think that.
And also, I met Gaddafi and Hussein with my president when I was Minister of Information. And I signed the resolutions against Gaddafi when I was President of the Security Council. Well, nice talking to you.
It's great to see you, Diego, and all the best to you. Vive Venezuela Libre.
Well, en Bielorrusia también.
Okay,
Big hug.
take care.
Big hug.
Stay
Take
safe,
care.
please.